Let me give you a big Labor Day surprise. Most people think if we all exercise the same and eat the same, we'd all look the same. And let me tell you why that's wrong. Your body is unique and your metabolism is unique. I'm Lacey Green and I'm a super trainer at Body. That's BODI.com. And you can't see me, but I don't look like your average personal trainer. I'm curvy and I'm proud of it. So I created a program for beginners only on the Body app to show people like us how to get incredible results and be our version of happy and healthy. This isn't just workout videos. It's people like you and me. It's community. It's incredible trainers. It's easy to follow nutrition and mindset experts to help you reduce stress and just feel better. And you can get started with my new program called For Beginners Only. Now, here's the big surprise. If you go to body.com right now, that's BODI.com, not only can you get everything Body has to offer at 50% off with an annual membership, you'll also get an additional 20% off, but only during Labor Day weekend. Let's do this together. Go to body.com. That's body with an I.com.
All right. Jump up. Get it. Hey. Devil with a blue dress, blue dress, blue dress. Devil with a blue dress on. Ooh, yeah. Devil with a blue dress, blue dress, blue dress. Devil with a blue dress on. Beep, beep, bye, bye, fo, fo, bum.
Wow. Hello, Duke fans. Welcome to episode 189. Y'all like the wow? Oh, my God.
Never done the wow intro before. I like
Wow.
That perfectly describes yesterday. We just ended the podcast now.
Right. That just happened.
So
and that
long,
just
folks.
happened
Thanks
again.
for tuning in. This was
Episode 189. This is the Duke Basketball Report podcast. I am Jason Evans. I'm not going to go through the whole hello kind of thing. Donald Wine, Sam Klein, thanks for joining me. The Blue Devils have, oh my God, like we beat UNC in, well, I'll just say it, in a game we did not deserve to win.
not in the least.
Not even a little bit.
No arguments there. But a victory is a victory, and oh, how sweet it is. God, can you imagine being a Carolina fan? Hey, folks, before we get to all that, just really, really, really quickly, there's some big changes coming for the DBR podcast. We're going to detail them more down the road a little bit, but we just want you to know, if you are someone who subscribes through SoundCloud's kind of going away. Sam, can you explain what the hell this is just really quick?
Sure. So if you listen to the show on any of the services like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all those, no changes coming. If you listen via SoundCloud on your desktop or through the SoundCloud app or anything like that, be on the lookout for our post about this show, the next episode that'll go up on the DBR page this week and on the forums, anywhere that you read about us, stay in touch with us. Just take a look there. We're going to be migrating to a different service, and there's going to be some other changes coming. It only affects the SoundCloud listeners. So just if you're a SoundCloud listener, be aware and make sure that you follow us to our next destination.
You stated that perfectly. Thank you very much, sir. And by the way, that's also, we're going to talk about this a little later on. This edition of the DBR podcast is brought to you by Byrd Campbell, the fine business law firm in Texas and Florida. We're going to talk more about them a little later on. But okay, time to get down to business, gentlemen. The Blue Devils defeat the North Carolina Tar Heels by the score of 98-96 in overtime. It was just wow. We were down 13 points with 4 minutes left. There have been a million games this year and in recent years where I know my Duke fan friends have complained about Duke's free throw shooting. We have no right to ever complain about free throw shooting again, because the display that North Carolina put on, I feel for them. I can't imagine being a Carolina fan today. It would suck. But let me bring in Donald Wine. Donald, go first. You were out in L.A. watching this game. Actually, Donald, don't go first. I've changed my mind.
Sam was
somewhere
at
the game. I'm saying where Donald is, and I'm like, and Sam was at the game. Sam, what was it like to be in?
If you had done the normal intro, you would know that. But
I know. I'm too excited.
I don't know if you can hear it in my voice. I'm still coming off all the emotions and madness of last night. I was at the Dean Dome for the game. It's my second time seeing a basketball game in the Dean Dome, but my first time seeing a Duke UNC game. And let me tell you, as much as we give Carolina fans crap for the the atmosphere in their house versus our house, it was electric last night. Carolina fans were ready to take down Duke in an upset. They were ready to see Cole Anthony go off. They were ready to spoil Duke's, return to the top of the ACC regular season standings, which they're still chasing, but still in second place. Carolina was ready for all of that. They were retiring or, half retiring, however they do those half retirements. They were half retiring Joel Berry's number last night. So people were jazzed for that. Tyler Hansbrough was in the house. It was really happening in Chapel Hill last night. And for most of the game, as you all know, for most of the game, UNC was totally in control. The fans were electric, and then missing free throws, just one after the other down the stretch, Duke clawing back. The stadium was stunned silent at the end of regulation when Tre Jones made the shot. Somehow less than silence, extra silence after Wendell Moore tipped in Tre Jones's miss for the buzzer-beating victory.
More than silence. What a great way to describe it.
It was well, and we were. So I was sitting in the upper bowl and surrounded by Carolina fans. I wasn't, and the Carolina fans they're so polite. At least the ones that were sitting near me, they were also very polite. So I didn't, there was no rubbing it in. There was no pointing at them or anything. Almost everybody, like I shook hands with a couple of people on the way out of the stadium. One, he was a student or about student age, gave me the bird, but everyone else was excessively polite. So it's not like you can be like overly excited during it, but it was electric. The Duke fans who showed up, some of them were kind of loud, but really it was the overwhelming UNC presence and the deafening silence at the end of the game that was so incredible. I was sitting such that I was closer to where UNC was missing all their foul shots at the end of the game. So I just one after the other. That was happening all right in front of me. And you could see the sort of slow devastation, especially on Andrew Platek's face as I think he missed 3 big ones down the stretch. Oh, what a killer for him.
He almost airballed one of those.
Airballed one of them.
Yeah.
But hey, you want to talk about missed shots? Duke missed a ton of shots in this game and looked sloppy.
Wait! Stop!
What?
Stop! We're not going to discuss the game yet. We're not doing the game yet. I want to discuss how we each experienced it. You gave us the stuff. You gave us the Carolina.
The mostly silence. I was sitting with my father, and he likes to, and he would like when something good would happen, he just puts up his fist for me to pound it, and that's about the level of joy that we were expressing. I think I jumped out of my seat like 2 or 3 times to celebrate something, but I am an emotional person. And it was relatively muted for me. Donald, where were you? You were in Los Angeles watching the game. What was that like?
I was planning to go to the Duke SoCal watch party, but I got tied up with work, so I ended up just going down. I'm staying here in Manhattan Beach, just going down the road to a bar and watching it. It was on a little TV. They had the XFL on because the LA team was playing. And so I'm watching this game, and everyone was kind of like, hey, there's a Duke UNC game on. This is kind of interesting. It's funny, another guy, a Duke class of 06 guy that I knew, walked into the bar randomly. And one of my friends from law school, ended up meeting me at the bar to watch the second half. So at the end of regulation, this guy comes over and starts talking to me. He's very hammered. And he's like, oh, what do you think about this game? And I'm like, trying to be all polite and saying, look, guy, I'm trying to concentrate on my team here. And at that point, that is when Tre Jones hit the shot to send us to overtime. I screamed. The entire bar at that point knew that there was a Duke guy there and that he was very, very happy. I was running around the bar high-fiving people I didn't know and people that I did. But
that's awesome.
But when Tre, at the end of overtime, when Wendell Moore did it, I jumped up and I was kind of in disbelief because I was like, they're going to wave that off. I'm just to celebrate. I'm going to look like an asshole because they're going to wave this off. We're going to go to double overtime. And then when I saw the replay, that's when it all hit. And it was just incredible. But guys, 8 years to the day after Sub-Zero happened too.
Yep.
I know UNC fans are just dead this morning.
they're seeing the number 0 in their nightmares forever. So here's how I experienced it. Kind of weird. So my wife and I had theater tickets last night, and when you guys don't know because you're not married. When you're married,
happy wife, happy life. I know what that is.
So we went and saw a wonderful play at the Alliance Theater here in Atlanta. It's a very big, big time plays. Really enjoyed it, and I was radio silent. Like I literally, I turned on my phone. I had 130 text messages from people. But I did not read a single one of them. I had no idea what had happened. We got home. My wife went to sleep, and I started watching the game. It was around 11:30.
I can't even imagine what this is like.
I wish I was awake. I wish I had known this, and that you had said something, and I'd be like, "Oh, I'm just going to stay up until Jason gets."
I had forgotten that you were going to be watching on delay because I think I texted the two of you and was like, What are we doing? What's going on? And Jason wasn't looking at anything.
I'm serious. Like I had no idea. It was like experiencing it live, which is what you want. That's what tape delay is supposed to be. We are in this modern era where we can do this kind of thing. But for me, so like the game ends, it's like 2 a.m. The game ends. I'm literally bouncing off the walls. I'm going insane. The dog's chasing me around the living room. And there was no prayer of going to sleep. No prayer. I'm operating on like maybe 3 hours of sleep. I almost woke up my wife, who does not like basketball, to say, you have to watch this. We would be divorced if I had. So thank God I didn't. But it was unbelievable. And by the way, the best story of watching the game is Harry Giles and Jabari Parker, who are now teammates in Sacramento. Have you guys seen the video?
Oh,
there's a great video of the two of them in the Sacramento locker room. It's right before their game, and you could see Harry Giles. I'm not clear. I think they're watching the Wendell Moore play. I don't think they're watching.
Yeah, they're watching the end of the game.
Yeah,
right, exactly. So you see Harry Giles suddenly stand up, and there's no audio on it, which sucks. But you can see Harry going, "Oh shit! Oh shit! Oh shit!" And then
that's why there's no audio on it.
Harry dives on the floor. I mean, like they are in full celebration mode. It's great. All of Duke Nation, Twitter was going insane. It just people dumbfounded, amazed, both at how it went to overtime and then how the overtime ended.
Duke never led in the whole of regulation. They tied it up for the first time.
We were up 4-3 at one point. That was it.
Oh, we were? I don't even remember that.
Exactly. It seemed like 3 days ago.
They tied it up. They tied it up in like at the buzzer, just like in the Austin Rivers game, and then only took like a real lead for any period of time into the overtime period.
Mm-hmm. And then the overtime's crazy because we take a lead, then Carolina storms back. How many times in that game did you think we had lost? ESPN, when we were down 13 with 4 minutes to go, and Vernon Carey fouled out, ESPN had UNC as a 98.7% favorite to win the game. 98.7%. I'm shocked that it's that low.
You know what's funny? You know what's funny about being
I thought there was no way we'd come back and win.
We've seen comebacks like this before, not in all of the exact same detail, but the game last year against Louisville, the UNC game, if you want to go all the way back to the Miracle Minute, Duke has had comeback wins that they've pieced together just in the last couple minutes of the game. Like they weren't long comebacks. What's funny about that is that it sort of trained me as a fan. For the first like 12 minutes of the second half, I was getting more and more depressed because it was like, all right, we started the second half with a 9-point deficit. Let's cut that in my, the logical part of me is like, let's cut that 9-point deficit slowly throughout the game and see if we can tie it up.
Get it to 3.
Right.
Yeah.
Get it. Yeah, exactly. And I think in that stretch, Duke might have gotten it down to like 6 or 5, but then it ballooned back up to 9, 10, 11, up all the way to 13. I was more depressed and hopeless with 6, 7, 8 minutes left in the game with Duke still down 12 or 13 points than I was with 3.5 minutes left, because I thought, all right, it's a 12-point comeback. It's a 13-point comeback. We've done this before. I can count the possessions. I can see the missed free throws coming. I can see the steals. I can see the shots. Like all of it sort of came into place And I knew that I wasn't ready to give up on the game with a minute left because I hadn't put my jacket on. I wasn't ready to go yet. I was like, no, Duke. This is exactly where a Duke team under Mike Krzyzewski thrives. They have that comeback in them. I can feel it coming, even though the logical side of me was like, Duke is playing like crap. We are not going to win this game.
So the one thing that I want to take us back to is the end of regulation. And we talked about this, and I know you guys saw this when you watched the game. We get down, we get the rebound, and we take the shot. We're now within 3. We're within 2, and then UNC goes down and they make one of 2 free throws to go up 3 points, and then call a timeout. Roy Williams calls a timeout, and I know you guys know why, because flashback to a few games ago where he didn't tell his team to go for the foul up 3, and they end up losing in overtime.
3, go for the foul. Yeah.
So As soon as this happened, someone's like, "Why would Roy Williams call a timeout?" And I was like, "Oh, they're telling him to foul." That's exactly what he's doing. He's going to spend all 60 seconds telling these guys to foul whoever has the ball and send them to the free throw line. While he's doing this, in the other end, Tre Jones is like, "Okay, when I get the ball, I'm going to get fouled. How am I going to do this?" And it seems like this was a play that he has practiced a million times because he was the only person. He is the only person.
He said,
yeah.
He said that John had told him how to do this and that they practiced it and the ball was going to go. That because he flings that up there and he immediately starts going toward the place where it ricocheted to. Like,
yeah.
It's crazy to think that someone could have that as a design play, but he said that John Shire told him take a couple steps to the right so it's not straight on, so it comes off at an angle. I mean, that's brilliant. John Shire, full credit, babe. Full credit.
Yeah, here's the thing, though. Just like every play that's drawn up, there's the play and there's the execution. Nobody in that gym, and even John Shire, who probably told him what to do, nobody knew where that ball was going other than Tre Jones. And Tre Jones looked like he knew as soon as he sent it like a missile. He didn't lay it off the rim. He threw it like he was shooting a gun, and it bounced off with such force that he was the only guy that knew where that ball was going. And because of that, he was able to get his own rebound and make a ridiculous shot that really, honestly, if he shoots that ball 99 times out of 100, it's not going in.
And the classic version of that is taking the ball in one hand and like baseball throwing it at the backboard, right? Which maybe lets it bounce like back to the middle of the paint where you might be able to go grab it, and perhaps you've given yourself enough force that you can get into the lane faster than everybody else. He did a totally different version of it, which was much cleverer, right?
Yeah, but here's the thing: even with throwing it off the backboard, it still has to hit the rim. Otherwise, it's not considered a shot. So if there was times where guys would throw it just like baseball style off the backboard and try to catch it, but now that's considered an illegal free throw attempt and the other team gets the ball. So you still have that factor, and he knew he had to hit the rim, but he had to hit it at the right angle for it to ricochet. Yeah. Well, I mean, because there's
right, that's what I said. It's not actually that useful. I think it's more wishful than useful.
Yeah.
He hit it to a point where he was like, I'm going to hit it, and it's going to – I mean, he caught it basically with – his foot kind of teetering on the edge of out of bounds. But he caught it on the fly. He knew exactly where that ball was going. And because he did, it set us up for one of the more memorable plays in this history.
The thing I love about it is how much Tre took over down the stretch. He scored 15 points in a row, 9 in regulation, the first 6 points of overtime. And in the post game, I mean, this is so great. In the post game, they asked him, hey, what was going through your mind? What were you thinking about? And his answer was, Tre Stones. He talked about his brother and how his brother had all these great moments, was known as the guy who was the clutch guy down the stretch for Duke. And he was like, doing this is my way of like being part of the Stones family, which was really great. It was awesome. And also Coach K said in the post-game press conference that during timeouts at the end of regulation and in overtime, Tre was really vocal, and Kay was like, Coach K said, I knew it was time for me to step back a little bit and let Tre step forward. And Tre was saying to the guys, hey, trust me, you can count on me. We are going to win this game. And Coach K said he lifted up the spirits.
Clearly, we saw some some stuff come out this week about how tough Coach K was on the team in practice after their recent lackluster performances, particularly the Boston College game. And a bunch of the guys on Duke last night didn't seem like they came with all the fire necessary. So whatever Coach K's motivational tactics that he was employing this week doesn't seem to have stuck with Matthew Hurt or Alex O'Connell or a couple of the guys. So he probably was looking at the situation and thought, you know what? I've done what I can. I've got one of my captains out there running the team. He's the best player on the floor tonight. Let's just let him, guide the team and figure it out.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent way of putting it, and I think that's entirely accurate about Tre being the best guy on the floor and these guys being willing to follow him. There are two more things I want to cover. I want to talk really quickly about Wendell Moore, and then I want to talk a little bit about UNC specifically, the Carolina team and the game that they played. But everyone wants to talk about Wendell Moore's putback, but we only have that shot because of his great tap back on that free throw. I mean, Wendell makes.
It's one of the all-time hustle plays in Duke history.
Yeah.
Like
he earned
for that
he
to
earned
happen,
that tip in, right?
Absolutely.
No question about it. He talked about that he grew up in Charlotte, and after the game, he mentioned that he watched this game, the Duke UNC game, his whole life, and he saw all these heroes. He knew all these guys who had became legends by what they did in this game, and for him to have this happen was like a dream beyond a dream, which is just a great story of a Charlotte kid who, like he said, always imagined that maybe someday this could happen to me, and then it happens to him. And by the way, this was the first double-double of Wendell Moore's career. He has 17 points and 10 rebounds. That 10th rebound, he got the double-double on the game-winning play. How fitting, how great for him.
And in a game. And in a game where we talked about, Jason, before, when we previewed this game, we talked about UNC's rebounding and how Duke was going to have to match them. Wendell Moore was the one who was the most above and beyond last night in terms of matching UNC's size, even though he's not as big as Brooks, Baycott, those guys. He was in there making a lot of plays with those big guys around him, especially with Carey fouling out of the game.
Yeah, we talked about the rebounding. Duke was out rebounded by 9 in this game, and that was, as you recall, Sam, you asked me how does Carolina win this game? What do they do well? And I said rebounding, and that was almost our downfall. And then the other thing about it, I wanted to come clean. We talked about who the key players would be in this game. I said Jack White and Matthew Hurt because Carolina's going to go big and Duke's got to be able to match them. I was wrong. Jack White, Matthew Hurt combined for 18 total minutes. Don't really play very much at all in the second half. Coach K, I feel like when the game is on the line, Coach K wants to go small. Seen that from him over the years, and I think we're seeing it, again this season. It wasn't that Vernon Carey fouled out. Matthew Hurt didn't foul out. Jack White didn't foul out. Javin DeLaurier didn't foul out. But down the stretch, none of those guys were playing. And by the way, down the stretch is the final 4 or 5 minutes of regulation and the entire overtime. Coach K was playing nothing but wings, because I think he's decided with his team he wants to go small. And by the way, one of the other things he's decided, he loves Wendell Moore. I mean, there are times that I think Wendell Moore is frustrating to watch. There's
frustrating on offense.
Yes, I was going to say there's some things he does on offense with the ball in his hands where you kind of go, really? I'm not sure that was the smartest thing to do. But Coach K clearly loves a lot of what Wendell Moore is bringing to the table. Donald, agree?
I do agree. And we challenged him to be better offensively in the last episode, and he was better offensively. But like you said, there are some moments during this game where we're like he puts his head down and goes to the basket, and you're like, what are you doing with the ball? But it seems like in the second half, later on, as we were starting to mount the comeback that actually happened, like Sam said, there was times throughout the second half where we just the wall seemed to be the 6-point deficit. We always get to that point, and then they would make 1 or 2 shots and then be back up to 12 points. But when we made that final push, Wendell Moore was very good with the ball. Tre Jones was very good with the ball. Cassius Stanley had a couple of lay-ins where it seemed like he was gliding through the air and just head and shoulders above everybody else. So it was a comedy of errors for the first 38 minutes of the game. But when it comes down to it, they found something deep within him, and Tre Jones especially did. And again, it was his leadership. It was their tenacity and their the things that they don't have. Those intangibles really came through, and really, honestly, at the end, a lot of luck, because not many people can say that they won a game off of not one but two buzzer beaters involving the same player. That is just incredible.
Two buzzer beaters off of missed free throws.
Yes,
I mean,
the exact same thing.
The hardest the hardest rebounding situation in basketball is getting your own free throw miss. And for us to do it twice is crazy. Hey, just really quick, guys, I want to talk about UNC. Full credit. This is a team that has lost many spiritless games this season. They have, frankly, not played hard, not played like a team, not played fast, not played the way that Roy Williams teams usually do. And last night, they were absolutely 100% the kind of team that everyone had in the preseason top 10, the kind of team that people thought they would be this whole season. They played incredibly hard. They played really fast. I mean, this team, there were a number of times where Duke would score and Carolina would beat us down the floor and score to take those points, essentially take those points away instantly, which is incredibly dispiriting, but is a very Roy Williams thing to do. I don't know if I'm a Carolina fan, obviously losing a game like this is just horrifying, but it's almost worse that you sort of know your team is capable of playing this well.
Yeah. Well, Jason, I was saying real quickly, I think during the game, there were times where I was looking at this game and I was like, which team is second from last in the ACC? Because it doesn't look like us according to the record, but it damn sure isn't this other team. Like, they played like they were vintage UNC, and this was a vintage Duke UNC game, which I think would just be so frustrating if you were a UNC fan to see that they put this effort in a game that, honestly is not a big game by standings, but the fact that they could put in this effort last night but can't do it the other games of this year has got to be just mind-boggling to them.
There was a bit of a trick to it, which is that they were making a lot of mid-range shots that were ill-advised, and Duke was sort of letting them have them. Duke was getting, was playing hard on defense 5-6 feet out from the 3-point line, and then would sag as UNC would start to drive to sort of pack the middle and wait for whatever the follow-up was. And Anthony and Playtech, all these guys were making these crazy shots that I don't think Duke expects their opponents to be hitting half of their mid-range shots. But as you pointed out, Donald, they were playing hard. They were, they were doing what was coming to them, and it was working. The missing all the free throws is not something you expect out of a team that is otherwise performing at a high level. And they weren't letting Duke establish any kind of offense. When Duke on offense was disjointed, there was a lot of dribbling and a lot of running at the hoop, and not a lot of weaving and passing and the kind of stuff that you expect to see from a Coach K offense.
Yeah, can I ask you guys? I mean, the on the one hand, I feel like I'm not dispirited by us playing a close game against Carolina, because I feel like this Carolina team played way better than they have most of the year. I've seen them play several other games. This was completely different from how they played many other games. But there's a piece of me that's like, look, we had 2 games this week where offensively, it seems crazy to say in a game where we scored 98 points that offensively we struggled, but we did struggle on offense. Against BC, we were terrible on offense.
It wasn't clear what Duke's offensive game plan was last night.
No, it really
in
was
scoring
not.
all those points. And you want data on that? We're 23 games into the season. After the game last night, Duke's overall KenPom efficiency dropped by almost a full point after that game. That's how poorly, the stats don't know that UNC was taking mid-range shots or long twos. It knows that UNC was making a bunch of shots from the floor, and it knows that Duke was missing a bunch of shots. By the way, KenPom stats also don't give you any credit for free throw defense. That's not how tempo-free statistics work. So Duke played a lousy game last night, and they look worse in the numbers for it.
Although it is worth noting that KenPom thinks that Duke was playing a terrible Carolina team, and again, I feel like last night was not that bad. But the reality is 2-0. We've won 3 in a row on the road, which Duke has not done since 1978 to 79. To win 3 consecutive games, no home games in between on the road.
That must just be
cool.
a scheduling quirk. That's Duke has had lots of good teams with lots of winning streaks. I can't believe that they never had 3 road games in a row like this.
No, we've had them
they have.
Last few
it's
years.
not common,
but like
it's not common that we have 3 games in a row on the road. But every time we've had 3 games in a row on the road since 1979 to now, we haven't won all 3 of them. So. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's impressive. It matters. That's very impressive. So this edition of the DBR podcast is brought to you by the fine gentleman at Byrd Campbell. And I want to point out something. We mentioned at the start that we're making some changes here on the DBR podcast. We're going away from SoundCloud. We're going to be going to a new podcast network. Again, for most of you, it won't impact things at all. In fact, the folks that are probably impacted the most are Byrd Campbell. Just the nature of our new relationship, we're not going to be able to bring Byrd Campbell along. They have been wonderful, amazing sponsors for a long, long time. And Tucker Byrd sent a note to us, and I just wanted to read that on the air now. This is Byrd Campbell's goodbye to the DBR podcast. They say. And so our sponsorship of the DBR podcast these past few years comes to an end, and no better way to end it than in the warm afterglow of yet another victory over Carolina. It has been our privilege to lend our name and support to this podcast. Byrd Campbell's law firm motto is Byrd Campbell means business, but we never sponsored this podcast for the business. We only did it, as the Duke Fight song says, for the love of old DU. These 2 guys are true blue forever, Jamie Campbell and Tucker Byrd, members of the class of 1978. Gentlemen, thanks so much for your ongoing support of the DBR podcast. We wouldn't be where we are today without your help, and we're sad. As much as we're excited about what's coming up soon and our move to a new podcast network, we are so sad that Byrd Campbell will not be joining us on that journey. So farewell, good friends, and thanks so much for all the great memories.
It's kind of like we're leaving the home to go to college.
So we mentioned that Duke has played 3 games in a row on the road and won all 3 of them. We do want to preview the game coming up on Monday. Duke gets back into Cameron for a really, really important game against the Florida State Seminoles, team that is right alongside us at the very, very top of the ACC. It feels like the winner of this game will have a major leg up on the number 1 or number 2 seed in the conference, along with Louisville. Huge, important game. Donald, I'll go to you first. Tell me a little bit about what we should expect from our matchup against the Seminoles, a top 10 team.
Well, first, I think you kind of undersold it. This, to me, is the game of the season so far because of everything you said. Where we were at in the standings, we're both tied. It is going to be one of those games where it's going to be physical. Interior is going to need to be on point. Our rebounding has got to get back on track. And really, it's going to start, for us, it's going to start with Vernon Carey. I thought he was great against UNC until he fouled out. But he's going to need some help on the inside. Matthew Hurt, Jack White, Javin DeLaurier are going to have to step up because Florida State plays a physical kind of basketball, and it shows. That you're going to be tired at the end of this game. And for us, coming off of that mental high that we had last night, we got to now put it away because tomorrow night Florida State does not care that we played UNC on Saturday night. Devin Vassell and Trent Forrest are kind of the guys that they're going to go to a lot, and also MJ Walker. They're all a bunch of wingers, but really when it comes to their physical wingers too, these guys can go to the hole, they can shoot, they can do everything pretty decently, but it's the way they do it that'll wear you down. That's how Florida State really overcomes their opponents. And when it comes to our guards, Tre Jones and Jordan Goldwire, when these guys are playing defense, they're gonna come right at them. And I think the energy is going to need to be there from the get-go. Cameron has to be on point. These guys have to be ready because Florida State is going to be on a path where the physicality of this game is going to be not necessarily Louisville approaching, but kind of in that realm. So we got to just put our mind to that and make sure that we are ready for it. On offense for us, 3-point shooting is going to be great. If it's going to be key because if we can spread the floor out, then the physicality won't matter as much and we'll kind of neutralize it. But on defense, we really have to, limit them to one shot, make sure that when a shot goes up that we're putting a body on somebody and get down to the, nitty gritty basics of defense. That's kind of what we've been missing the last few games and why kind of some of these games the last, week have been erratic. But this team, no doubt, this is the game of the year when it comes to implications for, like you said, Jason, for the ACC tournament. And even when, later on, we're going to talk about the NCAA tournament. This is going to be one of those games that they're going to look at when you're considering teams for 1 or 2 seeds.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Hey, Sam. So let me get to you with this question. So in virtually every game that Duke plays this season, Duke has a depth advantage. We play 10 guys, and you feel like, oh, there's no one else out there who's really doing that much. Not so with Florida State. Florida State plays 10, 11 guys every single game, don't they?
Yeah, that I think is one of the keys for Duke. The depth that Duke brings has allowed them to make mistakes. So we talked about how in the UNC game, 3 or 4 of the guys really weren't that effective against Carolina, and it ended up, Duke's depth is a bit of a mirage when it comes to, 10 guys will play, but only 6 or 7 are really going to make a big impact. That can't be the case against Florida State. As you said, Jason, Florida State brings 10, 11 guys to play, and they don't rely on, their key players to do as much as other teams will. Just look down their stats. The rebounding is spread all over the place. The leading scorers are only in the low 10s. There's a lot of guys who are getting the ball and scoring. Duke needs to be able to match every single one of them. So look for Duke's depth to be just better than it was against Carolina. We can't have 3 or 4 guys checking into the game, chucking up bad shots and then getting pulled and calling that depth. It's going to take much more of a team effort against Florida State. And I'm very curious to see, because Coach K has tinkered with the lineup a little bit here the last few days. He inserted Jack White into the starting lineup, although Jordan Goldwire still ended up playing more minutes than White did against UNC. Curious to see how Coach K rejiggers the lineup against a Florida State team that, as Donald noted, is always very physical. So maybe we need more of Jack White, but we'll kind of see how the game is evolving. Expect Jordan Goldwire still to play a lot, but we need contributions from White. We need contributions from Matt Hurt. We need contributions from Alex O'Connell and Joey Baker. All of these guys are going to be necessary to beat the Seminoles.
Yeah. So Matthew Hurt is the guy that I think could maybe be in an interesting spot for Duke. He only played 6 minutes against Carolina, picked up 4 fouls in 6 minutes. Not a good effort on his part. And there've been
and was taking bad shots and
yeah.
Sort of looked lost he was having a freshman game on Saturday.
Well, and there have been other moments this season. I recall all the way back to the Georgetown game in December. Was it November? I forget. I mean, actually, it was
November. Yeah.
Yeah, where it felt like, oh man, Matthew Hurt has fallen completely out of the rotation, and then came back and had some really big games. Look, we saw Alex O'Connell for a little while. Looked like he fell completely out of the rotation. Came back and had big games. So I'm hoping that Matthew Hurt can turn the best version of Duke. Duke's best team is a team where Matthew Hurt is playing big minutes and scoring the way he can and presenting matchup problems the way he can. And the reason I bring up Matthew Hurt against Florida State is this is sort of an unusual Florida State team because they do have 2 7-footers, but for the most part, this Florida State team wants to play and does play a bunch of guys who are between like 6'4", 6'5", and about 6'8". It's sort of the classic team of a whole bunch of wings and interchangeable parts, and they all just switch around and all that kind of jazz, which is, again, different from what we've usually seen from Leonard Hamilton teams, different from what we've usually seen from Florida State. I think Matthew Hurt may be in a key position for Duke to be able to perhaps take advantage of that a little bit. His ability to stretch the floor, his ability to be a difficult matchup on the inside. If Matthew Hurt is back to being the player he was, it will present problems for Florida State. And so I think that could be one of the keys to this game. I'll put it this way. If it's a comfortable game for Duke, if Duke wins this game easily, it'll probably be because Matthew Hurt has created such problems for the Florida State Seminoles. That's my prediction for the game. If not, this is another nail biter, and we're coming down to free throws and stuff down the stretch probably. So getting away from the world that is only Duke basketball for a brief moment, the NCAA selection committee over the weekend released their, I guess you would call it their sample seeding, their initial seeding. They sort of said, hey, if the season ended today, I think it was on, I guess it was as of games played by Friday, because they didn't really consider the Saturday games. If the season had ended today, here is how we would seed things. They're just giving everyone a general sense of where things stand at the moment. And it's always interesting to look at this. They won't do this again until Selection Sunday. So they have Baylor as the number one overall seed in all of college basketball. Their 4 number one seeds are Baylor, Kansas, Gonzaga, and San Diego State. Duke is the number 5 overall seed, East, which is where we want to be, with San Diego State as our number 1. San Diego State's the 1, Duke's the 2, Maryland, the hated Maryland, number 3, and Butler is the number 4 seed in our bracket. Sam, I'll go to you first. Is there anything you saw here that you were like, wait, what is the NCAA selection committee thinking? Or does this make a lot of sense to you? And do you think does this set up well for Duke?
I think it does. I'm more in the latter camp. I don't see this being particularly controversial. It is sort of funny. We've seen Baylor and San Diego State at the top of the rankings most of the season, but it does put it sort of emphasizes the point that they Gonzaga. Are that good. Are they? Yeah.
You mean Gonzaga?
Yeah. Well, and
San Diego State sort of a slow rise. Yeah.
Yes, but that they're near the top of the rankings. It's really put it into stark focus that these teams are where they are, and that they are probably or maybe going to be 1 seeds when it's all said and done. We're used to seeing Gonzaga on the 1, 2, 3 lines. We are not used to seeing Baylor and San Diego State there.
Yeah.
So that part of it is pretty cool, and it's unlike most years where we think, such and such team is the last number 1 or the last number 2 or the last number 3. They're getting shipped out west. They get the short end of the stick because they have to play Gonzaga. Gonzaga isn't even guaranteed to be the number 1 seed in the West. They might get pushed out because if San Diego State ends up ahead of them, then San Diego State's in the West, and maybe Gonzaga ends up somewhere else. So that's sort of a new wrinkle for the rankings. I think the other thing it puts into focus is how in Duke's region, there aren't that many teams. Maryland is geographically similar to Duke and should end up, if they get preferential treatment, should end up in the same East Regional. But there aren't that many teams at the top of the rankings that are naturally aligned to the East region the way that Duke is, which I think bodes well for the Blue Devils. Hopefully it means that, they can get to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament, play in New York, and not have a hostile crowd. I'm honestly more looking forward to Duke, hopefully staying where they are. Maybe they lose 1 or 2 games, but they're still firmly in the top 16 and get that first weekend in Greensboro with no UVA fans in sight, no UNC fans in sight. None of those guys are going to be around. That's the part that I think is a huge boon for Duke. And of course, if we are looking ahead at an East Regional that features Duke and Maryland, get ready for storylines. Hooray!
CBS would love that, wouldn't they?
Look, as long as they're replaying the 2001 Final Four game, leading up to that, I'm fine with it.
That's cool with me. We'll consider it a deal. I like the seedings, but here's the other interesting thing that I'm looking at when I look at these preliminary rankings or the seedings that they have. They have 2 number 1 seeds going to the Big 12, and Baylor and Kansas is going to present an interesting option if Kansas loses in the Big 12 tournament to Baylor or to anybody, and Duke or Louisville wins the ACC, because I could see a scenario, especially if Duke wins, when they're looking at the thing. If we win the ACC and Kansas loses in the Big 12, that we could be on that one line. We may not be in the East, and I think that's where maybe it would put us in the East just by default, because San Diego State is listed as the fourth strongest number one seed. They're the weakest of the one seeds. So they would shift over to the Midwest, and we could possibly get the one in the East. But if there's going to be a scenario if Baylor loses, I think these remain relatively the same, where both Baylor and Kansas would end up with one seeds, and we would still be on that 2 line, regardless of whether we win the ACC or not.
Well, Baylor and Kansas, by the way, have another regular season game at Baylor. And then they presumably, assuming they both win in the Big 12 tournament, will play each other again. So there are a couple opportunities for those two teams to potentially trip up and have stuff, fall in weird ways. 2 really, really quick things I want to mention, and then we can be done with this. First of all, the committee said that there was a bit of a gap between the number 4 overall seed San Diego State and the number 5 Duke, and I think that's probably the case based on sort of how recent games have gone and the advanced metrics and all these other kind of things. It's not crazy to say that the NCAA selection committee could look at these 4 number 1 seeds right now and say these guys are kind of locked in place at the moment. I think it may take more than one loss to knock some of these teams off of where they are. Maybe San Diego State, just because they played such a weak schedule so far. If they lose a game, they won't stay in that number 1 seed line. But my real point about this is I think there's a pretty decent case that Duke will have to win out the rest of the season, including the ACC tournament, to get up to that number 1 line. Maybe we could afford one loss, maybe. But
Duke can probably afford a road loss if they beat Louisville in the ACC championship. That as a sort of like, if you have to beat good teams, if Duke beats Florida State on Monday in Cameron, and if they beat Louisville right at the end of the season, just to show that they've topped them after having lost to Louisville once already this season, I think that may make the leap for the committee, because as you said, San Diego State doesn't have opportunities like that. But if San Diego State is undefeated, you can't do anything about that. They're going to have to be a 1 seed.
Like, so let's say we lose the game at Virginia. I'm just, looking at the schedule and where that might be the only thing that would be forgivable and would still allow us to get a 1 seed. So I just wanted to point out that, you kind of, there's not a lot of room for error.
Duke's margin is very thin if they're still trying to get a number 1 seed. Exactly.
Then the other thing I wanted to mention, just really, really quickly, the committee, the selection committee this year is chaired, not just a member of the committee, the chair of the committee is Kevin White, the Duke athletic director. And now the way the rules work, he leaves the room. If they're talking about Duke, Kevin White is not involved in that conversation, as it should be. But I always feel like, when you've got someone in the committee room, you tend to, they find a way sort of to take care of you. It always tends to work out. Oh, that team, things worked out pretty nicely for them. Oh, they happen to have someone, their athletic director or something like that is part of the committee. And I feel like, look, I'm not saying that any shenanigans are going on, but I think that things are probably going to work out pretty nicely for Duke, unless we really start losing games.
Jason, I sat through 2.5 hours last night of UNC fans complaining about the conspiracy of the ACC against Carolina and in favor of Duke as the referees go. Lean into it, man.
Oh my God.
Just go.
And the TV Teddy was playing last night. Did you see that?
Oh my God, TV Teddy. We didn't talk. Can we go back for a second? Teddy Valentine.
Wow.
Ted Valentine was on one. There was one. He did it to Duke a couple times, but there was one play where he called Duke for a foul, and now I can't remember who it was. He called the foul, and then he just stood staring at whoever the player was, like waiting for him to argue about it before walking over to the table. My goodness, Ted Valentine has never been in as big of a mood as he was on Saturday in the Dean Dome.
He had a couple plays where he would even like call the out of bounds, like it'd go out of bounds off like several people, and he would just demonstratively walk over to the thing. Is like, I'm going to review this. I'm not even going to make a call. I'm just going to look it over here.
Look,
it's funny.
Look, the man looks good on television, but
yeah,
but oh boy, does he look for the spotlight.
But guys, really quick, back to wrap up the rankings, or at least the standings. One final point that I noted, we talked about how, the ACC this year may get only 3 or 4 bids. I think they may do a little bit more. Here's why. I'm looking at these top 16 teams, and the ACC has 3 of them. I can't recall a year ever, at least in recent memory, and you guys can correct me if there is one, where a conference has had 3 teams in the top 4 seeds of the tournament and nothing else. So I think that this lines up.
If you want to reduce that to 1, it's basically what Gonzaga goes through every year that St. Mary's doesn't make the tournament.
But I mean like Power 5 conferences. But
sure,
it's one of those things where if this is where they're looking right now, that could be the tide that rises. Not all the ships, but maybe a couple more.
It's going to be Virginia and maybe Syracuse, dude. There's no one else. There's no one else. It's just
at least that's
4.
Least that's 5.
I think we're getting 4 bids. We're not going to bother with parting shots. This podcast has gone on long enough, and our parting shot was TV Teddy sucks. We will, however, do our one closing note of player of the week, although, wow, I don't even know why, because I think it's a pretty obvious choice. But Donald, I'll go to you first. Who are you taking as the player of the week this week for the Duke Blue Devils?
I'm going to take TV Teddy. No, really, it's going to be Isaiah Jones, because that man became Tre Stones last night. So
I was going to say that. I was going to say he.
Sorry, well,
Tre Stones.
He did become, but I will say I will give a shout out to Wendell Moore, because Wendell Moore will live on in history as being the guy that tipped in the game winner against UNC. So shout out to him too.
Sam, who you got?
If we were doing player of the first half against UNC, I would have taken Vernon Carey. If we were doing player of the final 5 seconds against UNC, I would take Wendell Moore. But we're doing player of the week. And for the full performance, you got to go with Tre Jones. I mean, he was doing everything for Duke down the stretch, and he's the reason why Duke was able to pull off that victory in Chapel Hill.
Yeah, and do y'all even remember? This week includes the Boston College game, and he was unbelievably clutch down the stretch against Boston College as well. So it's unanimous. There's no question about it. Tre Stones is the player of the week for the Duke Blue Devils. That's going to wrap it up for us here on episode 189. 189 of these in the books for the DBR podcast. Donald Wine in LA, thank you so much. Sam Klein in Durham after spending the night in Chapel Hill.
It was quiet on Franklin Street. It was very quiet on Franklin Street last night.
We like it that way. All right, I am Jason Evans in Atlanta. This was a great, fun episode. I hope you all enjoyed us. Like we said, there are some changes coming to the DBR podcast. Going to make it bigger, better, bolder, all those other wonderful things. But one thing that will always, always be a part of who we are, Duke Band, take us home.
Let me give you a big Labor Day surprise. Most people think if we all exercise the same and eat the same, we'd all look the same. And let me tell you why that's wrong. Your body is unique and your metabolism is unique. I'm Lacey Green and I'm a super trainer at Body. That's BODI.com. And you can't see me, but I don't look like your average personal trainer. I'm curvy and I'm proud of it. So I created a program for beginners only on the Body app to show people like us how to get incredible results and be our version of happy and healthy. This isn't just workout videos. videos. It's people like you and me. It's community. It's incredible trainers. It's easy to follow nutrition and mindset experts to help you reduce stress and just feel better. And you can get started with my new program called For Beginners Only. Now, here's the big surprise. If you go to body.com right now, that's BODI.com, not only can you get everything Body has to offer at 50% off with an annual membership, you'll also get an additional 20% off, but only during Labor Day weekend. Let's do this together. Go to body.com. That's body with an I.com.